you know what old Jack Burton always says at a time like this?
Come on, then. I'll bite your legs off!
I can take it.
Great power comes great responsibility. We have a hope. Get to the chopper! And leave. Just a flesh wound. I am the father.
I am Dracula. A moment ago, I stumbled upon a most amazing phenomenon. Something so incredible, I mistrust my own judgment. Look.
Dracula. The very mention of the name brings to mind things so evil, so fantastic, so degrading. You wonder if it isn't all a dream, a nightmare.
Rats. Rats. Thousands. Millions of them.
But no, this is no dream. This is Dracula, the original terrifying story of a maniac and a man who lived after death, lived on human blood, took the form of a vampire bat, and lured innocent girls to a fate truly worse than death.
Dracula? Oh, what's he done to you, dear? Tell me.
He came to me. He opened a vein in his arm, and he made me drink.
And welcome back to the Monster Movie Stompdown. Of course, you got Sludge here. Then my co-host across from me
is Mark,
our brother from Texas,
Ruben.
And we are here with another Universal Monster classic film. We are tackling the 1931 Dracula. And thankfully, there was not another version of this for Mark to mess up.
I knew it.
Since he couldn't get the right. I mean, it was possible. I mean, there's several Dracula films. I mean, me and Ruben were joking earlier. I think Ruben brought up the Frank Langella one, wondering if you watched that one from the 70s.
That's hard, man.
You know, I mean,
that is hard.
I mean, in all honesty, for you, it's a lot more difficult this time around. I mean, because you've got Lugosi's, you've got, Frank Langella's, you got Peter Cushing's Dracula, and you got the Gary Oldman Dracula. Yeah. So
it's okay.
I would understood.
It's okay.
So, but thankfully, he got the right ones.
When I watched the Dracula, I watched the Blu-ray, and you could turn on subtitles, and it would just give you tidbits. Like Lon Chaney Jr. was originally who they wanted. Lon Chaney's who they originally wanted to play Dracula, and things went down and he couldn't do it. But one of the facts said Dracula has been on screen over 200 times in different movies, TV shows.
Man, that's crazy.
Everything. I mean, that would 200 times.
I mean, that's far more than Godzilla.
Stop.
Yeah.
Just saying.
I know where you're going. I see the look on your face, man. I know where you're going with this. Okay? Just leave this alone.
But according which it didn't say anything on the DVD on the Blu-ray, but then when I looked it up to make sure I had the number right, there's one other person who has been on screen or depicted on screen more
than Dracula?
Sherlock Holmes.
Really?
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
See there?
I wouldn't have guessed that.
Wow.
Honestly, my first guess would have been Tarzan.
Wow.
Right? That's a good guess.
Yeah.
If you're talking some of those.
Of course, I'm getting this. I mean, this is off of Wikipedia. So, but Wikipedia did have Dracula over 200 times, which is what the Universal Blu-ray had. And so it matched, and it said only surpassed by Sherlock Holmes.
That's correct. That's believable, though. I mean,
yeah.
In all honesty, I mean, Sherlock's been. I mean, there's a lot of American cinema and appearances of Sherlock. But of course, there's so much from the UK. I mean, so much. So I believe that 100%.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we're stoked. What we did this time for this movie, a little different than what we've done some of the other ones. Well, I guess because there's not really another option for the other ones. But this movie came out in 1931, directed by Todd Browning, and then produced by Carl. I can never get his name. Lemuel Jr. He worked on a lot of Universal Monster stuff. But they brought this movie out in 1931. However, at the same time that this was being filmed, they were filming a Spanish version, because at the time Universal was doing they didn't do a lot, because I think there was only like 2 more movies they did after this where they did a Spanish production of the movie they were filming for the foreign markets at the time. So what would happen is the crew for the American film would do their scenes, shoot and everything in the morning and then into the day. And then when they would get done, the Spanish crew would come in, all the actors and stuff, and then they would shoot the rest of the night. Pretty much the same scenes or the same film. So we actually went and watched both versions. We did the American version or the English version, and then we did the Spanish version, because the Spanish version's got a pretty big cult following, and a lot of reviewers honestly kind of toss of a coin over which version's the better version, the English or the Spanish one. So we're going to break down both of those films and watch both of them, because they're both amazing. I mean, both of them are amazing movies. But Mark, you had something interesting for this one.
Well, originally, the movie, when initial airing, the first run, it was 85 minutes long.
Mm-hmm.
And what they ended up doing was, before the coding came out, removed the epilogue from this movie, because in speaking and talking about it, they were afraid that people were actually going to believe that there was a Dracula and that they were in danger, and and they didn't want to put so much fear into everybody, and so they removed the epilogue after the first initial run. Then it was removed.
I guess War of the Worlds radio show scared me.
Yeah.
And for those listening who don't know, at the time when, especially during silent films, and up into the beginning of audio films like Dracula and stuff, there was no MPAA. I mean, there was no coding registration as far as guidelines for the movie. There was no rating system, period. And before the rating system, we had the coding system. As far as it was pretty much the same thing, but it was you had a general audience, period, kind of review. So instead of having G, PG, PG-13, R, NC-17, you just had a general audience coding, and that came out in the early 30s.
Yeah.
And so when this one came out in 31, that didn't exist.
Right.
It was a few years later that the coding came out, and then they re-released this one, like Mark was talking, without the epilogue. We'd mentioned before the show they did it as well with Frankenstein.
Yes.
Especially like the little girl scene and stuff. So this was the beginning era of the MPAA before the MPAA came around, which is really interesting because I didn't know that about Dracula. I had no idea that they had taken it out. So I thought that was really, really cool. But so this movie was, again, directed by Todd Browning. Now, of course, the English version, we all know, has got Bela Lugosi as the title role of Dracula. Edward Van Sloan is Van Helsing. You got the great Helen Chandler, who plays in this as well. Dwight Fry, who I want to kind of point out because I'm going to point out his Spanish counterpart, plays Renfield in this. Now, for those who don't know, Bela Lugosi actually played Dracula before this movie. He was they were doing the Broadway play for it, and he was on it, and he wasn't in the running at all. Actually, the director didn't even want Bela Lugosi to play Dracula, but he happened to be in LA at the time that they were doing casting, and he really fought for the role. I think he even took like a really low pay, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he did
to capture it. So I mean, compared to what everybody else does. So he just impressed the executives enough and really pushed for it, and reprised his role from the play to the actual film.
Well, and I think the film is actually from the play, not from the actual book.
Well, yes,
that is correct.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously,
the screenplay is based off the play.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Not
That's
off
what.
the
Yeah.
book.
That's what I was trying
Yeah,
to get.
and that's why
Yeah.
you'll see, in comparison to the book, for those who've read the book, there's a lot missing. A lot missing. But then some things changed and stuff. But yeah, based off the play itself, that screenplay, and not only was Bela Lugosi brought on from the play, but so was Edward Sloan. Edward Sloan played Van Helsing in the play as well, and came on to do the film version. And Bela Lugosi, actually, when he finished with this, they offered him to do another play of Dracula, and he said no. He said, you couldn't pay me enough, because he was afraid after this he would be typecasted.
Typecast, yep.
Which unfortunately happened anyways.
Right.
You know what I mean, for him.
Yeah, that's correct.
But of course, so they did this one, and Universal released it in February of 1931. I know they paid like $40,000 for the rights, but I think they kept the budget under $200,000, under $100,000 even, I think. But it ended up doing like almost $350,000 in the box office, especially during the Great Depression era. Did extremely well. The Spanish version of the film, which we definitely want to bring up, was directed by George Melford. And then, of course, Carl Lummel Jr., he produced it as well. But this one you have, and I really just want to kind of point out here, because again, this is very important as we review these films. Carlos Villegas, is that how you say it? Ruben Villegas?
Yes.
I'm going to ask the Hispanic guy, because that's what we do here.
Yeah.
Okay. On
Yeah.
he plays Dracula. It's phenomenal in it. And then as far as Dr. Van Helsing's played by Eduardo, couldn't even say his last name. Ruben, if you want to take that one, because I have no idea.
Azumena.
Okay, so Edward
Azumena, yeah.
I'm just gonna call him Ed. So Ed played Van Helsing. Great job at that as well. But Pablo Alvarez is who played Renfield, opposite of Dwight Fry, who played him in the American version. And again, production for this one was done kind of the same thing, same budget, did pretty fairly well in the box office. I don't know the exact numbers. It didn't do as good as the American version, English version, but it still did very, very well. This movie, of course, plays out the story of Dracula, and both versions, to be honest, in my opinion, I struggled with which one I like more. And I would have to break it down scene by scene. So, I mean, for those who don't know the story of Dracula, I don't know that I need to go into the plot synopsis of this film. I mean, it's, Renfield goes to Castle Dracula. He's working out a real estate deal for Dracula to come to London to the Carlton Abbey, where he brings his coffins and his dirt so that he can, find his new love, his new bride, pretty much in the process. And Van Helsing shows up, and they've got to take him down. And he's after Mina Harker, what they call her Eva in the Spanish version.
Yeah.
And it's up to Van Helsing and Eva's, or I'm gonna say Eva because I keep watching the Spanish version. It's up to Van Helsing and Mina Harker's father and her fiance John Harker to try and stop Dracula, which they ultimately do. And of course now there's a character named Lucy, who you should be familiar with. She's Dracula's first victim in London. He ends up turning her into a vampire. They do have to kill her in the process. They aren't able to save her, but do manage to save Mina Harker in the climax of the movie from Dracula before she fully turns into a vampire. Book's phenomenal. You all should know the story a lot. Most people probably have already read the book, or seen some movie, some Dracula movie, so you should be familiar with the story. But man, it's to decide which one's better. I struggled with this because, and I guess I'll start with my likes and dislikes in the film, because I'm gonna go with both of them because it's so hard. Both amazing movies, but I can't just say outright English version's better than the Spanish version or Spanish version's better than the English version. Both of them are great films. Title character, Bela Lugosi versus Carlos. I have to go scene by scene. There's moments where Bela Lugosi they both nail the role, but they handle it quite differently. Carlos brought a little bit more of a swagger to the character. A finesse, a higher class as far as the way he carried himself, especially when talking to the doctor or Van Helsing, the other characters. Even the beginning And there's slight differences in scenes because the Spanish crew would see, hey, this is what the English crew did. We're going to change it slightly throughout the film. The opening sequence, or not the opening sequence, but after Dracula arrives, he's at the theater meeting Dr. Seward, Mina's father, and meets John Harker and Mina and Lucy at a theater play. And in the English version, Dr. Seward comes out, talks to, Bella pretty much. It doesn't go too deep, but as far as the introduction to Lucy and Mina, it does, it's all there. But the Spanish version, the dialogue went a little deeper than the English version. So you're going to see little things like that. That's the differences. But when you watch like that scene particularly, Bella did a great job. Lugosi did a great job. But Carlos, in telling the story that he tells in that sequence, is just smoother. He has that swag to impress the ladies that Lugosi just didn't have. Lugosi's Dracula, I thought, was very cryptic, very dark, and which was great in a lot of scenes. But Carlos brought, again, that swag to him. And, of course, Carlos's eyes. His facial expressions in some points were just astounding. But so is Lugosi's, and it kind of depended on the scene. When Renfield first goes to Dracula's castle and Dracula's come down their stairs to meet Renfield, Lugosi's stare is just that 1,000-yard stare like you hear about in Rambo. That's just terrifying. Yeah. Carlos's stare was a little too bug-eyed at that point for me. I was like, oh. Yeah. It's creepy, but it's a totally different creepy, and I like Lugosi's better. So it was very hard to depict what I liked more, and I had to go scene by scene. So, for me, there's parts that the English version is superior. There's parts of the Spanish version superior throughout the movie. Both amazing films, but it's kind of a flip of the coin. One that Ruben will probably bring up is the mirror sequence.
Boy, you know me well.
Yeah, the Spanish version. I'll let Ruben carry describe that scene. But to me, the Spanish version nailed that scene over the English version. It's far better. But then if you go and look at the scene, actually my favorite scene in the movie is the scene between Dracula and Van Helsing, where Dracula finally, for the first time in the movie, comes after Van Helsing, and he's trying to take control of his mind to control him. And in the American version, he's kind of like that American, just bad A dude Van Helsing is. And Dracula's just like, your will is so strong. And because he can't get Van Helsing to come to him, he's trying, but it's like Van Helsing's like, no, not happening.
He takes about 2 steps,
2 steps,
5
and then,
backwards,
and then whips out that crucifix, and it just it's such a great scene. That's my favorite scene in the movie. It's just because Van Helsing, even though he's older in the book and in the movie, he just looks like a boss in that scene. As old as he is, I'm like, dude can go toe to toe with Count Dracula. Yeah. The Spanish version, not as awesome, but there's a really cool aspect to it. Because he does call Van Helsing to him, and Van Helsing starts to come to him, and you're like, oh, come on, man. Be the man. But then all of a sudden, Dracula's like, now put what's in your pocket in this box. And he covers his face. And then Van Helsing grabs the crucifix out, opens the box, but then slams the box shut so that you can hear it. And Dracula goes, did you put it in the box? And Van Helsing's like, yes. And then he puts his cape down, and boom, there's the cross. I'm like, oh, that's some sweet trickery, So it was still kind of cool, but that scene was so much better, I think, delivered in the English version. So, it's really kind of how you look at it. When later on in the film, when Jonathan Harker or Juan is out on the balcony area with Mina, or I'm sorry, Eva in the Spanish version. We're talking about the same people here.
Yeah. Same people.
That when she is kind of almost fully succumbing to the darkness to becoming a vampire, she starts talking about how she loves the night, and then she actually attacks Juan
Harker,
and I'm just going to say Harker. That's so much easier. Attacks Harker.
You say Harker,
and while the American scene's great, the delivery that she gives in the Spanish version is so much better.
Well, I think one of the things and I saw an interview with her.
Really? That'd be cool to see.
And she talked about how they did not say, this is exactly how we want you to act, how we want you to be. Like Mina's more closed or down or calm,
Yeah.
where she was Eva was a little bit livelier, laughing because
Yeah.
they told her, "You do it. This is your character. You do it." And so that's how she portrayed it, doing it the way she thought it would be.
Okay.
And I thought it was really good. And then at the time, she was 17 years old. She was 7.
Wow.
Yeah.
I would have
And
not have guessed
was
that.
her age,
I mean,
yeah.
she did not look 17.
Yeah.
Did not look 17.
So,
I mean, there's so much I love about this movie, both versions. You know, I mean, even the scenes that I prefer the Spanish version over the English one I'm not saying the English scene is bad or vice versa. They're so good.
It's a preference.
It
it's what
really
your preference
is. To me, the big outstanding factor, as far as the reason why, if I had to pick one, I would pick the Spanish version, is Renfield. The guy, I mean,
definitely
Pablo Alvarez. Now, Dwight did a great job as Renfield. I mean, he's got that, you know, that is an iconic laugh. But Pablo it's like he spent a month in an insane asylum and studied how these people acted, because he was just bat crap crazy through the whole movie. He was just, they're like, okay, man, Pablo, push it to 10. He's like, no, I'm spinal tapping this. It's going to 11. And he just soared. I mean, Van Helsing's my favorite character in Dracula in any film or version of it. For the most part, I love the Van Helsing character, but Renfield in the Spanish version of the 1931 film Dracula, I think, is the best portrayed character of any Dracula film there is. Like, Pablo just annihilated. So, I mean, if I went the basis on who's the better, I couldn't, I'd have to go scene by scene for each character and actor, except for Renfield. Pablo, not saying Dwight did a bad job, but Pablo just overshadowed Dwight's portrayal of the role. So, I mean, there's not really a whole lot of anything I think I don't like about the film. If there's anything I didn't like about the film, it would just be a preference deal. Again, Ruben's going to talk about one scene that they changed where I prefer the Spanish version over the English version. So, I mean, if you count that as a dislike towards the English version, maybe, you know what I mean? It's just I prefer the Spanish version better because of how they handled the scene. But as far as dislikes, I mean, maybe the only thing that I could say that I disliked about the film is the lack of vampire fangs. You know what I mean? Like, I would hope.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Both of them though.
Yeah, both versions. There's no fangs. And they managed to do that in 1922 with Nosferatu. How could you not have done that 10 years later? Almost 10 years later. You know what I mean? So, I mean, because when you look back, that's something my wife talked about earlier this evening, was when you look at Max Schreck, which of course that whole movie is just crazy anyways, and the dude supposedly never showed up during the day. No one saw him arrive. He was just there. No one saw him put on his makeup. He was just there in full makeup, the whole 9 yards. I mean, his fangs looked terrifying in that movie. They didn't do anything like that in this. So that would be my only complaint. Phenomenal movies. Both of them are great. I absolutely love them. It's scene by scene on which one version's better, except for Renfield, Spanish version all the way. Only complaint would be there's no fangs for the vampires. And there should be. It's a vampire movie. There should be fangs.
Right.
But the movie is so good that I overlook that. So that's me. I don't know who wants to go next. Ruben?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, man. I watched both of them, and I watched them back to back on purpose, because the Spanish version, I own it on Blu-ray, so I've seen it a few times, but I remember seeing that for the first time as a kid on one of the Spanish channels down here, and didn't even know what it was. I didn't know it was Universal Monster. I just knew it was Dracula. I will say I'm just like Sludge. It was so hard for me to decide which one of these was better. And so when it came to the ratings, I just gave them a tie because I felt guilty, and this is why. The Spanish version had an advantage because they could see what the English version did during the day, and they were able to see that and then say, okay, this is where we're going to change it. So the depiction of Dracula, I think we can all agree, almost every Dracula, the frame comes from Bela Lugosi.
Yeah.
That's who framed up. This is what Dracula is. This is how he's supposed to be. This is how he's supposed to act. Everything came from Bela Lugosi. It started with him. And they both are phenomenal actors. Now, I prefer the Spanish version. I do. But out of guilt, I could not give it a higher rating than the English version out of guilt. But the scenes, first of all, the special effects in the Spanish version are better.
Yeah.
Dracula coming out of the coffin, there's a mist. It's just not him coming out.
Yeah,
of the
that's
coffin.
right. And well, there's even like a
mist.
light too. Like when he's coming out,
Yeah,
you
there's
see the
a light,
mist,
there's
and
a
there's a
mist.
glow that they didn't have in the American version. That's right.
Yeah, exactly. And his bride, and the way the English version depicted the brides versus the Spanish version was a little bit better. The Spanish version, for lack of a better term, it's more gothic to me. Even though Bela Lugosi is the definition of goth,
Yeah.
I thought the film in its entirety, the Spanish version, was more gothic. Not necessarily. I mean, it's hard to describe, but I said, like the mist and just the way the scenes were carried out. Like you talked about the scene on the balcony when she's talking about she gets bit for the third time. So
yeah,
Dracula actually infused his blood into her. So now she's fully recovered and she feels great. But the dialogue on that balcony was better in the Spanish version than it was in the English. Now, that said, the Spanish version had the advantage of almost an extra half hour of dialogue to convey the story.
Yeah.
Where the English was an hour and 15 minutes, an hour and 13 minutes,
something like that. Yeah.
It was, something like that. While the Spanish version was an hour and 43 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm like, well, they had more time to tell the story. And I love that scene. You alluded to it, where Van Helsing discovers he's a vampire because he opens up that little cigarette case and he looks in there and he doesn't see Dracula's reflection.
Yep.
So he, I know what I'm going to do. So he tricks him to look into that little case, thinking it's just a regular old cigarette case. Now, in the English version, he just kind of swats it out of his hand. But in the Spanish version, Dracula he just destroys that whole box.
Oh, yeah.
Gives it a whack. Cigarettes go flying. It's just violent. It's more violent.
Well, and in the American version, you don't have the mirror. You never see the mirror.
Yeah, you never see the mirror. Yeah, exactly.
But the Spanish one,
you see it. Yeah, in the Spanish one, you see it. In the English one, you just see it on the table, and he picks it up and he looks at it and he goes, But you're right, and that's what I'm talking about. It's just those little things that make the Spanish version just a little bit better. But Lugosi gets some carte blanche here, and he gets some extra credit because he's the one that's defined. I mean, when you think of vampires, to me, you think of Bela Lugosi. You don't think of Nosferatu. You think of Count Dracula.
Oh yeah.
Even though, that's who you think of.
Well, I mean, and I can't think of a horror documentary I've ever seen where you don't have that first initial glimpse of Bela Lugosi as Dracula in the in the castle. It's in everything.
Yeah. So I prefer that. I mean, that's why the scenes in the Spanish version just were a little bit more. I guess they just put you into the story a little bit more.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm trying to think of some other scenes because there's so many good scenes in both movies. I prefer the Renfield in the Spanish version, just as you do. I even prefer the female characters for the Spanish version over the English version. They're both excellent. I'm not putting down either one, but I just thought that, I think it's because, and Mark was talking about an interview that they did with Eva, and she talked about that they dressed her more provocative. I'm not going to get this word out right. Yeah,
that did.
Provocative.
My wife,
there you go. It came out.
Sarah had even said
provocatively. Yeah. Then they did the English one. She goes, and I think that adds to the vampire legend of being this guy that can just seduce anybody and do whatever they can. And she goes, I didn't know they were she goes, but after seeing it, I realized that they actually dressed us a little bit more, the dresses were a little bit more sheer. It's a little bit more sensuous, I guess would be the word. I think that's the word she used, as a matter of fact, in the interview.
Yeah.
And so that's always cool. And I like the scenes where, especially the interactions, and that's where I think the interactions are better in the Spanish than the English. I'm trying to Man, I'm really talking up the Spanish version, aren't I?
It's great. I mean, it's really good.
I'm really talking up the interactions between the characters, Van Helsing and Harker, and they're just better in the Spanish version. They're just better, but they have the advantage of dialogue. And I also read a story where, since Browning was a silent movie guy, he didn't rely on dialogue as much as the Spanish version. He just relied more on the acting, I guess, so to speak. Acting, which I think in general, if you were to rate the acting, I might give the English version just a slight edge, because I like Lugosi's Dracula just a little better than Carlos's, just a bit, only because I guess, man, I don't know, man, that's really tough, because I loved Carlos's reaction to the crucifix in the two scenes.
Yep.
His was more of a it was disgusting to him to see a crucifix, where Lugosi feared it.
Yeah.
To him, it was more like he was scared of it.
That's what it is with those two. Is it's so hard for me to decide who I like more, because there's enough difference in the portrayal.
Yeah.
That you almost couldn't put them as the same exact Dracula. I mean, Lugosi was more terrifying, and it dealt with a darker fear thing. But again, like with Carlos, I mean, he had a gentleman's swag, which lent more to the sensual side of the vampirism in films that Lugosi didn't do. But then again, and Carlos didn't do the darker, terrifying side. So I mean, to me, it's so hard to decide who was better for me, because they are different enough.
Because it was more believable that Carlos was a Don Juan type of guy versus Bela Lugosi. He didn't come across as somebody that a woman would say, "Oh, look at this guy." Or Carlos did come across just a little bit more when they're talking. Girls are talking about him, and I'm like, well, it's more believable, I guess is the key term. But there's just so many good scenes, and if you put them next to each other, to me, it was next to impossible. I know I talked to you about it last night. I'm like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know what I'm going to say, because they're just so good. But I went back and watched the Spanish version and watched clips of different ones. I went back and forth today.
Well, I did the same thing after we talked about it. Me and Ruben both last night had talked about. We were like, dude, what do we pick? How do we decide? And we had talked about, like, what, we're going to go through and pick certain scenes, or like our favorite scenes, and kind of watch them again. You know what I mean? Like, because you really got to break it down, because both of these films are fantastic. And it's so hard to decide. That's why, like I said a minute ago, I mean, like, Ruben, I don't mean to take away from you. Like, I have to base which one's better scene by scene, except for Renfield.
Yeah.
Except for Renfield.
Yeah, Renfield wins.
Yeah,
Renfield
without
wins,
question. But everything else, I have to take scene by scene.
I think everything else, you can say, you can have a debate on who's the better, Eva. You can have who's the better, character. Which one's the better Van Helsing? I mean, they're both were good. I think the English version of Van Helsing wins, just because of I guess the experience. He was more experienced at playing Van Helsing.
Yeah. With the Broadway play, that makes more sense.
Yeah. So I think he was a better Van Helsing, and of course there's that comfort level that you get from watching. I mean, how many times have we seen the English version of Dracula? I mean, for me, it's in the high double digits, maybe even triple digits since I was a kid. So the only thing I didn't like, I'll name something I didn't like about the movie, and it was only in the English version. I never knew that we're armadillos.
Yeah, because they're not in the Spanish version.
I can believe the possum. I can believe the possum in Transylvania, but I didn't believe about the armadillos. I was waiting for a can of Lone Star beer to come out of the corner somewhere.
I remember,
wait, that would have been good.
When I went back and watched it, I'm like, why is there an armadillo? I'm like, it's not 30. They were just trying to throw any creepy looking animal in the scene at that point. Yeah, I remember thinking about that too.
Well, probably back then, most of North America didn't know what an armadillo was, except if you lived in Texas or somewhere down in
Florida.
Down in Florida.
Yeah, and that's completely left off of the Spanish version. Mm-hmm. That's not even The armadillos aren't it. The possum is, but not the armadillo. And I said, I guess they just had the animals in their cages, and they said, yeah, we'll use those guys. And those guys we're not going to use, we're not going to use those guys. So, but all in all, like I said, my stomp rating is a tie. But in reality, if I want to be fair, my personal preference is the Spanish version. It doesn't make it the English version any weaker. And that's why I just gave it. You know what? I wimped out and I just gave him a tie. But that's all I got.
Mark, what about you?
That's pretty good. So, well, first of all, I didn't see or even know the Spanish version existed until it was brought up. You brought it up, and really didn't understand why, again, until you explained to me that there wasn't dubbing back then.
Right.
And so that's why Universal had made the two different versions of it. And so, I thought Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt did. Oh, wait, wrong movie.
Wrong movie.
Wrong movie. Oh, no.
God. I brought up the dreadful Cruise's name.
I had to throw that in there. I thought, especially back then, it's in the 30s and acting where you had to act, and it wasn't, wasn't all that. And I thought, both versions are great, especially if you watch them, and it's just like I was talking earlier, how they wanted the Spanish actors to be, this is your character, you make that character. You read about it, you study, and I thought they did a very good job at that. I lean a little bit more towards the English version because that's what scared the pants off of me when I was a little kid. That's what I saw.
Yeah.
And so it affected me the most. But I think overall, probably of the monster movies that came out, Dracula's probably scared me the most and is my favorite. And so I really enjoyed it. Thought it, definitely no negatives here other than, just finding out now that there's a Spanish version and to be able to watch it and really get into it and enjoy it. So, I mean, overall, both of them are thumbs up. I did rank them the same, but I would lean more towards the English version only because that's
So you're the same as me. It's you just lean toward the English and I lean toward the Spanish.
And only because it just really affected me more as a child. I mean, it scared the dickens out of me, and that's what I remember. And but I think as far as the acting goes, it may go a little bit more towards the Spanish version now that I've watched it and I've seen it and checked some of the background and some of the interviews. Just like the interview they were talking about how the Spanish version kind of got the edge up on them because they got to watch them do it during the day.
Exactly.
And then they were working all night long. They were actually doing the midnight hour and
could do and did the last
that adds that could add to it.
Oh,
that could add to the atmosphere.
So
that would add to the atmosphere.
So I thought it was really good, but excellent movies, both of them.
So, and I'm
I don't know if you guys, I didn't watch the Plex versions that you have.
They're from the Legacy.
They're from the Legacy. So because did you notice that actually a Spanish version, it was a better quality than the English as far as clarity goes and noise?
Yes, I did.
I mean, I was like, wow, wait, man, what happened? Was this thing, where did they find this print? So I guess what I was wondering, because apparently it was like, they just found it, I guess maybe in the 70s.
Because they had because it was out of print for a very, very long time until they found this print, and Universal released a VHS copy of it back then, or in the 80s, and I think it's still the only print or the same print they've been using. Now I'm not sure which one they're using for Dracula because the Dracula prints have kind of gone through hell and high water over the years. I remember we were actually on tour and went to I don't even know if you'd call it a town, but a small town in Utah that had a theater that had been there since the early 30s. No, I'm sorry, the mid 20s, and it had gone through 2 fires and still there. They were stored and stuff, but they had a little museum upstairs and had the original camera from that had shown Dracula on it, and next to the case was the remnants of the Dracula film they had. And it's just fragments because it got caught up and burned in the fire. And that was a notorious thing that happened back then a lot too. There was not unknown
Those-
for fire
Yeah.
accidents to happen. So, so I'm not sure which print they used for that. I mean, but the Spanish one, I mean, it's the same print. I mean, the Spanish one is so good, and as far as historical standpoint, that it's part of our Library of Congress.
Right.
I mean, it was,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
that's a pretty big feat, I think. So, and now I've got to ask too for this one because we didn't bring it up, but
Yeah.
Dracula kills Renfield in the movie. And
Yes.
there's a
Oh,
drastic
the death
difference.
of Renfield. Yes.
There's a drastic
forgot all about
difference
that.
between the two. And, in the American version, Dracula, chokes him, presumably breaks his neck or throws him down the steps. Okay.
There.
Down the
And he goes
stairway.
rolling down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the Spanish version, he just straight picks him up and drops him. And you hear this thud, like, and Renfield die, I mean, it's a
You're
little bit
absolutely
more
right.
brutal. Which, I mean,
Man, I meant to bring that up and I
Oh,
forgot
man.
all about it. I gotta tell you
like,
what, man.
which version do you guys prefer? Me, it's the drop. I mean, that was just
It's the
cold
drop.
blooded.
Without a doubt.
Yeah. Because he's begging for his life. He's like, no. And he just picks him up, by his neck and just throws him down. I mean, he just drops him 30 foot down, because they're up on top. And another scene that's different, now that you reminded me, is when he has Eva, or he's carrying her in the English version. He's just leading her. He's
Right.
just leading her down the stairs. In the Spanish version, she's passed out and he's carrying her.
He even
a la
puts her
Frankenstein.
down
Yeah.
to take care of Renfield. Yeah, carries her whole away.
Yeah, he puts her down. He puts her down and goes and takes care of Renfield and then picks her right back up again. And then in the English version, he's kind of just he's leading her.
Yeah.
And then picks her up.
With the Renfield death, the Spanish version I think is a little deeper too, because in the English version, he throws him down the stairs. Van Helsing and Harker go in. Harker gets Mina, and Van Helsing off screen kills Dracula. But then, like, they go to leave, and Van Helsing's like, "I'm gonna stick around," and that's it for the English version. You're like, what's he doing down there?
What's he staying
no
down
explanation.
there?
But in the Spanish version, one, you get to see the dead body of Renfield, which was just, that thud, everything. It's just far superior death. But Van Helsing says, "I'm sticking behind to fulfill my promise to Renfield," because earlier in the movie, Renfield asks him to save his soul, to help him. And so as Jonathan and Mina are leaving, or Juan and Eva are leaving the Abbey, you see Van Helsing standing over Renfield's body there at the end. And it's like, dude, and that just made the climax of that a little bit better. I mean, it was made more sense. But yeah, so I'd bring it up to the Renfield death, Spanish all the way. So as far as ratings, I mean, you guys both gave these a tie. We gave them both a solid 4, both versions. I was the only one who I did technically give the English version a 3.5 and the Spanish a 4. Only because, again, Renfield. Like, that
makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I just couldn't stress
an
it
argument
more.
for me. Yeah,
because they're both just on par. But the thing that just takes it that extra little mile, was Pablo as Renfield. He was just, to me, is outstanding as that character. Even in The Office, when they bring him in the office for the first time to meet Van Helsing, and he's talking to Van Helsing and just stops and tells him to wait, and he goes after that fly. It's just so awesome. I'm like, this dude is nuts, so I loved it. Great movie. Both versions are great.
Yeah. And then another difference is the death of, the stake through the heart of Lucy, which is in both of them, you don't show it. But in the Spanish, you hear her cry when he puts the stake through her heart.
Yeah.
The English version, they just come back like, we took care of it.
Yeah.
And there's nothing, you don't hear the scream. You don't hear anything. Which is, I think I would rather, I like that, you hear them, put the stake through her heart. She lets out a cry, and that's it. It's not on screen. Just like the English version isn't on screen, but in the English version, it's just, they go and then they come back and said, she's at rest now. We don't have to worry. I'm like, why didn't you show it? Why didn't you at least, show them going through there, and in the Spanish version too, Eva she's not in her coffin, but they show her wandering around that basement. And in the English version, they don't, it's not like, well, maybe, in the English version, he goes, well, she's not in her coffin. Well, she's around here somewhere. And then Parker takes off.
Yeah.
And then that's the end of that, you know, and then the rest stays with Van Helsing. That too was just a positive for the Spanish for me in my book. So, but both movies are just, you know, if you don't know about, you can turn subtitles on and see what they're saying in English. I turn them on, even though I understand Spanish just fine and I can watch it, but I turn them on just because I know Tex-Mex, not true Spanish. And this was true Spanish. Okay. And there's a lot of different dialects, I guess, as you would say, of Spanish. And so, I mean, I sat there and I understood almost, but there was a couple of words that they just flow off the tongue in Spanish.
Right.
So it was great. I'm like, man, this is great because they just flowed. They're just such good actors and actresses that it was just like, it was truly, both of them are a work of art. They're
absolutely
are a work of
absolutely.
art. Yeah, they were both our work of art. Just like Phantom of the Opera was a work of art. Dracula, both of these versions are a work of art that is, they're both a very, I would call them artsy films. Yeah, they're a horror movie, but they're very artsy and they go way beyond just the horror. They go way beyond just good and evil, you know. They go way beyond that. And so I think anybody would enjoy either version. And one is shorter than the other, so it's your preference. Like I said, the Spanish gets into it a little bit more, and it's a longer movie. So you know that's always,
and I prefer,
you know, that's an advantage.
I prefer the Spanish again because Renfield is freaking awesome in the Spanish version.
Yeah, even his hair. I mean, he's got that crazy hair. You know, he's
every
got that
bit
crazy
of it.
hair.
Well, and like just his dialogue. I mean, when he's outside, after they chase Dracula off, and they find him outside because he starts maniacally laughing, and he's like, you know, he just flips on them. Like he goes from completely psycho to just
to a gentleman,
and just flat, just 2 seconds flat, just changes his role on him. He does so well in that role.
Yeah, and it's like he goes, oh, so yeah, I think it's the scene where when Helsing tells him something about, oh, your master's Dracula, and then and then boom, he changes into a gentleman. It's like, oh, I don't know the slightest idea what you're talking about, sir.
Dracula. He's so good at it. So.
Yeah.
But all right, well, you guys got anything else on this one?
Nope. Good on this one.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, 4 stomps from us. You guys definitely check it out. I mean, check out every one of the Universal monsters that we're going to be reviewing, but this one is definitely top of the list as a must see, as a classic. Check out both versions, and you decide for yourself which version you like more. But so hopefully you guys,
and let us know which one you prefer.
I would love to hear.
Yeah,
love to hear. Which version you guys like more, because they're both great. So, but all right, well, that'll do it for this episode. Now, of course, we'll be back next month, continuing on our Godzilla films, which we hopefully, Mark, will get the right one this time. It's going to be the follow-up
we'll get it.
to the 2002 Godzilla against Mechagodzilla, the only direct sequel, I should say, in the Millennium series with Godzilla Tokyo SOS, which is absolutely phenomenal movie. So that was going to be a good one to do. And then we'll be back next month as well with our next Universal Monster outing. And that's going to be the follow-up to Dracula with Frankenstein. And I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of this movie. So,
I mean, when you take Universal, to me, Frankenstein. I mean, you know, my favorite is Creature from the Black Lagoon. But when you say Universal Monsters, the first thing that pops in your mind is that image of Frankenstein. That's That's just life. That's just the way it is.
You know, I mean, in my nerd vault, that, you know, has been talked about a million times before, tons of Godzilla posters. But aside from Godzilla posters, when it comes to movie stuff, there are 2 monumental movie posters in my nerd vault. One is Phantom of the Opera, Lon Chaney, and the other one is Frankenstein. It's that mug shot, man. They're just,
and you've had that for a while.
I have, man. That's one of my favorite. I had to take it down for a little bit. Poor Gavin was afraid of Frankenstein. But now he's okay with it, so it's back up finally. But yeah, I've had those posters for a long time, so I'm stoked about this one. That one will get pretty deep as far as delivery of the message of the story of Frankenstein that Mary Shelley wrote. But yeah, super stoked about that one. So all right, again, guys, thank you all so much for listening. And hey, just want to do a quick plug. If you guys have not hopped over to our buddies at Give Me Back My Action Movies, go check them out on Facebook. Listen to their podcast show. They have been knocking it out of the park with some of the best movies. Like they did Hot Shots Part 2. They've done Cobra. I mean, they're killing it, man. I'm loving this selection they're doing for these action flicks, and we may be working on something with them in the near future to do a co-episode. So I know me and Charlie's talked about it, and I think it'd be pretty cool. Trying to hunt down to find the right monster action film. But once we get that nailed down, we'll let you guys know. So, but definitely go give them a like and check out their show. They do a phenomenal job, and I will say, I mean, I love our show. And I'm gonna pull for our show more than anybody else's show, but their rating system stomps ours, all pun intended, because those cats rate theirs where we do stomps. They rate theirs on Al Leong's. And for those who don't know action movies, may not have heard the name Al Leong. He may be the most.
You've seen him.
You've seen him in everything. You've seen him in everything. He is that Asian extra that's in every movie. If you go watch Die Hard, he's the dude eating the Crunch Bar. Like he's in.
I just saw him in Escape from L.A.
Yep.
I just saw him in Escape from L.A. I'm like, hey, there he is.
Man,
there he is.
When I listened to that first episode, and they're like, "How many Al Leongs?" I'm like, "You guys topped us. That's awesome." Like rating it by Al Leongs for action flicks was just genius. So, but so show them some love, and we will see you guys again next month. This is Sludge
and Mark.
You got Ruben in Texas.
Y'all have a good night.
We have a fault.